What makes someone remarkable? Do you mind being described as the white people whisperer? What is the optimal age to get married?
That year was the first year that we ever heard a teacher talk about race.
Is the college application process fair?
You start to find the non-obvious way kind of works.
Is there like a cartoonist community? So many times when we go live with these things, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom.
Boom.
Happy Thursday, Non-Obvious Nation. We are back for another edition of the Non-Obvious Insights Show, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today as we talk about the most interesting stories of the week and feature a special guest. And this week we've got John Ruhlin, who is a gifting expert. He's written a book called Giftology, and I know that giving gifts is a big topic that's on our minds right now, many of us. And one of the perspectives he will share is definitely non-obvious, which is that this may be the exact wrong time to be thinking about gifting. So we are going to dig into that, into what it takes to create a memorable gifting strategy and lots of other topics related to gifts. But first, I want to share with you some of the most interesting and non-obvious stories of the week. And I'll start with a story about convention centers. For many of us who are used to going to lots of live events, the fact that convention centers are probably empty right now is no big news. But one of the articles I read this week in the New York Times talked about how many of the convention centers across the country in the US are making big multi-million, hundreds of $1,000,000 bets and expanding. And that probably seems like a really odd thing to be deciding to do right now. I mean, who would spend $500 million to expand a convention center when nobody's holding conferences anymore? But as the article talks about, they're really thinking long-term with this vision and saying, you know, conferences are going to be back in 2022, 2023, and they continually have to expand their convention centers to compete for these huge shows that bring 70,000 people into the city, fill the hotels, bring lots of economic activity. And, you know, I don't necessarily think that's a bad bet. I mean, I do think that right now there's a lot of pent-up desire for people to come back to coming together with their industry. And that, I think, is going to lead to some bigger events, some mega massive events in 2022, probably, maybe the end of 2021, if you're being really optimistic. But that's an interesting thing, because on the surface, it seems totally counterintuitive. Why would anyone do that? But sort of makes sense if you think about the long term. Another story that I was looking at this week was all about the Olympics, and I'm really bummed that Tokyo did not happen yet. I'm hoping it does happen in 2021. But the Olympics has been pretty forward-thinking in adding some fascinating sports to their roster. And just this week, they announced that for the Paris Olympics, which will be in 2024, unless something else crazy happens, they're going to add breakdancing. That's going to be one of the sports. Seems odd to call breakdancing a sport, I'd have to say, but it's fascinating the different sports that they're adding to the Olympic roster. Surfing, sports climbing. When I had my son guess what sport they added to the Olympics, and I said, well, it's something that you probably wouldn't consider a sport. His guess was chess. So who knows? Maybe chess will be an Olympic sport next. Stranger things have happened, right? Another story this week that I loved because it was all about innovation was a polar bear researcher who decided to ask his dad for help with a big challenge that polar bear researchers apparently have, which is attaching these GPS tags to polar bears because they need a way where it's still removable, so they can't just inject it into the bear. And he couldn't figure out a way to do that safely and effectively. And so he went to his dad, who worked at 3M, part of the Post-it team, and they pioneered this new version of a GPS tag that can be attached to a polar bear by using the hair of the bear itself. And I looked at that and I was like, man, that's such a beautiful, non-obvious idea. And it all came about because like someone happened to have their dad working at the right place. And I would love to live in a world where like that happens more strategically instead of accidentally. I mean, that would be really nice. But I love this story because it kind of pointed out that sometimes you just have this non-obvious solution staying out there. And if you can just bring it together, you can come up with something really interesting. Another story this week that captured my attention was all about a Smellicopter, as they called it. And a Smellicopter is a drone that can follow certain smells. And the way that it does it is by using a live moth antenna as part of the drone. And so now you've got this kind of augmented drone that's augmented with like a literal body part of an animal, which is simultaneously kind of like scary and interesting at the same time. And sometimes that's what happens with some of these stories. Like they're scary and interesting at the same time. Another story this week was about artifacts and the fact that there are many stolen artifacts in museums around the world. And now colonized countries are saying, look, we want those back. And it's this really complicated bureaucratic thing. And it's such a big challenge to try and figure out, like, how are we going to do that and deliver on that? But this story was a great exploration of it. It was in Vice as part of their Unthinkable Ideas issue, which is a great issue that you should definitely check out. The last story I want to share with you before I also talk about one big announcement, and then we're going to get to John and the interview all about gifting, is AI entering into remote work. And this is probably kind of predictable, but there's many people who are innovating around the idea of quantifying the way that we work right now. So everything from helping to schedule meetings in a more automated way to like tracking what happens in those meetings. So now there's new platforms where they can measure how long did one person versus another speak? Did one person dominate the conversation? They can track your facial reactions to say, like, were your eyes open? Were you actually paying attention? I mean, really extreme stuff. And if you think about like the possibilities of this, it's, on some sides good because it can automate things that nobody likes doing, like sending meeting invites. But on the scary side, it's like, well, do we really want to be monitored every moment about whether we are really paying attention? And what does it mean to be paying attention? Do we have to have like this fake look on our face all the time just to be able to trick the algorithm into thinking that we're paying attention? So this is a challenge. Like, this is something that's going to be a challenge for some time. So anyway, the one more story that I think is really interesting, and it actually leads into the big announcement that I have for today. Tinder published their year in review. And I love these year in review things from the social media platforms because it gives you a glimpse inside data that they usually never share. And Tinder's year in review is a 1-minute video, which we'll share in the show notes as a link. So you can watch that 1-minute video. It's really interesting. But one of the things that they found is that people are using beliefs as a way to filter more aggressively who they want to even get to know in the first place. And so if you don't believe the same thing I believe, I'm not interested in talking to you at all. And it makes sense, but it's a little sad too, because it's like you could put these beliefs front and center, and now you never actually get to another conversation with somebody who might not think exactly the way you think. And so maybe it's making dating a little more narrow-minded, or as I started thinking about it, and it's been a while since I was, dating, but maybe that always happened. Like maybe people always found people who thought the way that they think. I don't know. But that was just an interesting story. It led me to, though, a relationship to a big announcement that we have right now, which is a huge summit that we're putting together as a Non-Obvious company with several organizing partners. And it's called the Beyond Diversity Summit. And I'm so excited about this. It's going to take place at the end of January. It's totally free to register. So if you go to nonobvious.com/diversity, you can register for this event, and you can listen to a lot of these amazing speakers talking about diversity on every level. So talking about diversity when it comes to how we think about ageism or racism at work or disabilities. There's so many different speakers talking about so many different aspects of this that it's going to be so exciting. I just can't wait. I mean, if you go to the website right now, what you'll see is lots and lots of ideas for sessions, panels that we're organizing right now. We've got lots of speakers confirmed for this. It's going to be just a really, really fun gathering of conversation, and it's going to lead to some really interesting things. So that is coming up. I'm very excited about it. And now I want to bring on my special guest for this week, John Ruhlin. So John, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Thank you for being here. It is a opportune time to talk about gifts because everyone wants to talk about them. But I know one of your favorite topics to talk about is gifting as a strategy, as opposed to a man, December's here, I got to come up with some gifts. So for people who aren't as familiar with your background, you've written a wonderful book called Giftology that's been out for, I think, a few years now.
Yep.
Where you kind of talk about what you call the art and science of using gifts to cut through the noise. So talk a little bit about your philosophy of gifting to start with, because I think that'll be a great segue into what makes this perspective that you've got very non-obvious.
Yeah, well, what I would say is that most people, whether you're a CEO, author, entrepreneur, widget manufacturer, nobody cares about gifts. Let's be honest. Like, nobody wakes up at 4 a.m. doing their miracle morning saying, man, if I just had my gifting strategy together, my business would 100x. But whether you're a sales rep or whether you're a solopreneur or a billion-dollar company, every business rises and falls on relationships. It could be relationships with clients, investors, mentors, advisors, employees. And how we show up for people determines whether or not our relationships flourish or whether they flounder. And really, a gift is just a tangible delivery vehicle for an emotion. And so people are like, John, I don't care about gifts. I'm like, I don't care about gifts either, but I do care about like getting 50 referrals next year. I do care about my employees sticking around. I do care about opening doors with my billion-dollar clients or prospects. And so at a core level, if most people think they're a 7 out of 10 on gifting and gratitude, and yet most people are really a -3. Like, they're not very good at it. Like, most people aren't very good at gifting their spouse, let alone all of their dozens or hundreds or thousands of business relationships. So,
and what are the like, what's an example of a bad gift?
Anything that you would say, oh, thanks for, this is a token of our appreciation, or anything that you would say, oh, it's the thought that counts. Like, you would never call a relationship a token relationship. Like, you'd say they're a valuable relationship. Or you'd never say like, hey, it's the thought that counts. No, it's the thoughtful thought that counts. So a gift card, horrible idea. Hey, here's a piece of plastic, go buy your own gift. Or, hey, it's the holidays, I have to give a gift out of expectation and obligation. Like, if you only do gifts for your spouse or for your clients at expected times, like anniversaries, birthdays, and Christmas, I say no ABC gifting. If you're on a limited budget, you don't want to do things at table stakes times. And if you show up for people only in reactive states, you gave me a referral, here's your gift. That's not a gift. That's a tit for tat. That's an incentive. That's a transactional relationship. And yet most people want to say that they have a deep relationship, but they're only giving gifts, even bad gifts, at expected times. So it's like, hey, here's a bottle of wine for $100. You did $1 million in business with me last year. Does that feel good? No, it feels awkward and uncomfortable. It doesn't feel equal. It feels very transactional. So most people don't realize what's really going through somebody's head when they receive something. Like, I have all these people that reach out to me privately. They're like, John, I did $250,000 in business with that person last year, and they sent me a box of peanuts. I'm like, I'm texting pictures to my partners like, WTF? Like, I did $250,000 in business with you last year, and you sent me a tin of peanuts? Like, yeah. They don't realize that they're spending money to actually silently piss off, annoy, frustrate, or give gifting guilt to somebody that's saying like, they don't know me at all. I'm a number. And so they don't realize,
yeah, I mean,
you don't matter.
Yeah. And I wonder if you think about, I mean, you're obviously very strategic about gifting in a way that many people don't think about gifts just as strategically. But I think one thing that people commonly do is they say, okay, these 10 people are super important, and these like 50 people are, not really that important. So like, is this gifting strategy really about like the person who spends 250,000? Like, of course you should give them something nice, but like, what about the person who like didn't spend anything, or the person who like probably won't spend anything? Like, how do you help people think about valuing that person?
Yeah, well, I think that, a lot of what we do is we try to take inventory of all of their relationships, all their clients, mentors, advisors, investors. Like, most people have a marketing plan or a business plan or a finance plan, but if you ask them, even big companies, what's your relationship plan? And what are you reinvesting back into those relationships to ensure that they stick around, that they grow? And the secret sauce is, like, we have a mutual friend in Cameron Harold, like, he's like a sales rep for me. I could never hire Cameron for $2 million to sell, but because I've loved on him, he goes and has opened doors on some of the biggest stages and some of the biggest clients that we've ever had based upon how we made him feel and inspired him. So I think most people don't realize that there's a math equation of what they should be investing in their relationships. And that goes for somebody that's spending a little bit, or maybe not spending anything, but they're an influencer, or they're a referral source or a center of influence in that particular industry or space. I'll spend more money on somebody that's a solopreneur, a relationship of mine, based upon who they run with. Are they hanging out in YPO circles or EO circles or cadre or mastermind talks or pro sports teams? Like the way that we've landed all of our clients in all industries isn't always the person who's spending the most money, but they might be a consultant in that industry. And most people are not making strategic bets and investments. They're waiting for things to happen, and then they want to do a reward. If I get a referral, I'll send you a gift. I'm like, no, take your top 200 or top 20 relationships and pour into them. And guess what? They'll be inspired over the next few years. Like it has to be a long game. Like you can't play this for like 3 months and think, oh, my giftology strategy is going to work. But if you play it in decades and make those strategic bets, then over time, guess what? People want to reciprocate and refer business and open doors because you've bet on them before they did anything for you.
And a lot of what you're talking about is word of mouth. I mean, what happens when someone gets a deeply memorable gift is that they talk about it. And I want to share some of the examples of the gifts that you have talked about or helped inspire people to give, because they're quite unique. And we're pulling up some images of some of these. And I wonder if you could just share a couple of stories of really sort of memorable types of gifts that you have either given on your own or helped your clients to give.
Yeah. Well, I would say that our number one gift this year and for the last 20 years has been cutlery, handmade cutlery. People are like, knives? Like, that's a weird thing to give. Yeah. And I'm like, the reason it's so popular isn't because the knife, although they're like the Rolex of cutlery and people love them. It's the idea that they can be engraved personally. And most people have this set that they got for their wedding gift, 5, 10, 50 years ago, whatever. It's a crappy set from Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever. So giving something that's a practical
or IKEA.
Or like IKEA, like if you give something that's best in class that people use, I love practical luxuries, and I love gifts year round that include the inner circle. So many people only gift the employer or the client. I'm like, they're married. Most people are married or have a significant other, and their person is not oftentimes included. The spouse isn't included. So if you can give gifts that include the assistant, the spouse, the kids, and the pets, I call it there's 4 buckets in the inner circle. So the reason we do so much with knives and things that are kitchen related is most people still eat in 2020. And if anything, they're cooking more at home now than they ever have been, to the point where Cutco, a $300 million company, can't make knives fast enough. In 2020, in a pandemic, they can't make. Why? People are spending more time at home and looking at their countertops and their cabinets and their siding and their furniture and saying, instead of going on that vacation, we should probably like update some things that are overdue. So I like things that include that family. If you do that, it changes the relationship, and now you have an internal advocate.
That's so powerful. I mean, it's something that we really learned very early on the publishing side. I mean, my wife runs a lot of the relationships that we have with our authors as a publisher. And one of the things that has become kind of a standard practice for us is the week that an author's book comes out, we focus on trying to make the whole family feel really excited about the book. So we send a thank you to the spouse saying, hey, your husband or your wife disappeared for X amount of time to write this book, and finally it's out. And we just want to say, like, thank you for taking care of everything else while they were doing the writing. And it's such a powerful thing a lot of times. And sometimes it's flowers, sometimes it's like smoothies or whiskey or, whatever we find that person loves, because you're right. It's such a powerful thing to give to someone in that way. And look, I've got right here, right next to me, a product of your advice, which is our shared friends, Derek and Melanie Coburn, who run a group here in DC called Cadre, gave these, which is one of the Cutco knives. And what's interesting about this, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, is it's engraved, but it's not engraved with their logo. It's engraved with my logo and my name. And that's a really powerful and non-obvious strategy that I know you have shared with people many times, because the natural thing is, hey, I sent you a coffee mug with my logo on it. Isn't that great? And it's not, right?
It's the worst. Yeah, I mean, Derek and Melanie are great clients. So we have the gifting agency that does, helps people, the kind of the done for you service. There's a lot of people are like, John, this is hard. And so they need a partner. If you want to ship gifts to hundreds or thousands of people, it's not an easy thing. But one of our rules is it a gift or is it a promotional item? If you give a Rolex, but you put your logo on it, it's no longer a gift. You made the gift about you. And a gift by its very nature is 100% recipient focused. No, like you're a member of Cadre, that's cool, but you care about your own name and your own brand and your spouse's name way more, 1,000 times more. So when people send out gifts, they're like, John, we did giftology, it didn't work. And I'm like, did you follow the recipe? And they're like, well, I did giftology-ish. And I'm like, it's like baking bread. You could bake bread 10,000 times in a row, but if you don't put yeast in, you're not going to get bread. I don't care what you like, how many times you want to do it. And so the little things, the handwritten note that came with the knife, the timing of the gift showing up out of the blue, not at an expected time, the fact that it was personalized with your name and your spouse's name and your family name. Now it's an instant heirloom versus a tchotchke, a swag item, a promotional item. And so many people think they're doing giftology or gifting, but really what they're doing is manipulating. Hey, you did business with me. Here's a polo shirt with my logo on it. Go advertise for me. That's not a gift. That feels icky. It feels
works for Nike.
Huh?
It works for Nike.
It works for Nike because they've spent billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to make their brand cool. So there are times when you'll break the rule. If you're Harvard giving out a gift, the Harvard logo adds value. But you notice the higher up the food chain, like our pro sports teams, like the Cubs, the higher level the person that they're giving the gift to, the smaller the logo we make it. So like there's an example of like a crazy artifact. We took 100-year-old wood from the Cubs locker room that they were ripping out, and we had to remake. This took like a year. Rebuilt 500 Bluetooth speakers. And then we lasered it. Notice it wasn't red and blue and like flames coming off of it. It was just lasered into the wood. And they were numbered 1 through 500. Now it's a piece of history. The Cubs logo is cool to somebody that loves the Cubs, but making it about the person and understanding, does your logo like take away value or add value to the product? If you're Nike, it adds value. If you're Under Armour, it may add value. If you're Lululemon, it adds value. But if you're like XYZ accounting firm or XYZ marketing firm, the logo probably is like neutral at best. But if you put your logo on it, don't expect it to be received at this like deep emotional heart level, because you just turned a gift, an artifact, into a promotional item. And they think they're the same. It might be the same item, but the little things are what makes it either land as like a one-to-one human connection or like this like automatic thing that shows up to the masses. Those resonate very differently at a heart level, very, very, very differently depending upon who you're giving it to.
Is there an ideal amount of money to spend on a gift?
The math equation that we use is you should reinvest back into all your relationships, employees, clients, partners, even vendors, 10% of your net profits. Now, some people do 5, some people do 15, but 10 is the average. People are like, 10% is a lot. And I'm like, you put $1 in, they basically bought their own gift, and you get to keep $9. Like that's a pretty good. And what's interesting is if you make the investment on net, I don't care what your revenue is. Some people have huge revenues. I'm like, what's your net? You reinvest back into that relationship, not just to keep them, because a lot of people don't have issues with retention, but they have issues with cross-sell and upsell and getting people to advocate it within different divisions inside a company. And they really struggle with referrals. Referrals don't happen on accident. Referrals happen because you choose, not because you had to, not because they signed a big check, not because it was a big deal, not because they sent you a referral. When you make investments in relationships, your clients, your employees, because you want to, because you chose to reinvest back into them, now you have what I call active loyalty. That's where people go out of their way at dinners and golf and meetings to go advocate on your behalf. That's the secret sauce that happens if you continually make deposits into your relationships over the course of years. Now people are looking out for you to go open doors to recruit people to your company or to recruit people as clients. That doesn't happen on accident. That happens because you chose to reinvest 10% back into your relationships.
Now, where does creativity and cleverness fit into this process? Because I have to admit, like, one of the things that I think we as an organization across either of my companies could do better is personalizing the experience of gifts. I mean, we do that well on the publishing side, but what we've leaned towards a lot of times that's actually worked for us, and I'm curious where you think this fits, is being quirky and clever. So, for example, we had a gift that we used at a trade show where we gave people really nice tweezers, and printed on them was our tagline from the Non-Obvious company that said, "Non-obvious ideas raise eyebrows." And they were tweezers, right? We have another gift that we give when somebody brings me in as a speaker. We send them a little card along with this beautiful Scandinavian tiny speaker that says, "We know you love great speakers, so here's one for you." Just a little play on speakers, right?
Yeah.
So, like, where does clever, but they're not personalized, right? They're just clever. So how would you kind of measure cleverness versus deeply personal?
Yeah, well, I would say that similar to your spouse, like, it's fun to have cool little touches, cool little like reminders that you exist, that you're thinking of them. But I think that if you want to move somebody's heart and soul to be kind of bought into you for life, that's different than being cute and clever. So a lot of times people have cool themes and they'll hire marketing companies to do amazing, cute play on words, which is fine. But I think that if you can combine the in order of importance, personal and deep will outlast the cute and the clever. The cute and the clever is fine, but it's a fun touch. It's like when we sent out to some of our relationship, we partnered with a company early on, Smart Suites, which just sold for like $390 million. But early on, we partnered with the founder and sent out 200 cases of Smart Suites to a bunch of our clients and relationships, because they had kids, and getting kids to eat healthy candy is dang near impossible. It didn't even exist. And so it's a consumable, it goes against kind of our philosophy and our rules, but it was a fun touch. It was something interesting and quirky, and we did a little play on words, whatever else. But I wouldn't say that that's the same as like the $1,000, artifact mug that we do that tells somebody's whole life story that, like, even when we give them to billionaires, they cry. So that there's a different level of gravitas and level of depth of relationship when you can gift artifacts to people versus the fun touch, the quirky touch, the creative touch. Nothing wrong with that, but I think that falls more in marketing versus like depth of relationship, where you want to inspire referrals and deal flow and have people go have awkward conversations at the board meeting for you. That happens when somebody's moved at an emotional level.
Yeah, I think it's already causing me to sort of think about this a little bit more deeply, because, like, I mean, I am a marketer, so, like, of course that's going to be my mindset, and you're right that's only going to take you so far. And so one of the big messages I'm hearing from this, and I'm taking away, and hopefully anybody who's watching right now is also taken away, is that it's just so important to try and get to the next emotional level, which is a big thing and a challenge to do. We are sitting here right now, kind of time-wise, 2 weeks before Christmas. Let's say someone's watching this and it's about to hit that holiday season. Maybe they've bought their gift, whatever it is. Maybe they haven't. How do you start right now thinking about gifting as a long-term strategy instead of, oh man, I got to go and get a holiday gift for all of my kind of teammates and clients right now?
Yeah, well, I would say that, like identifying who those important relationships are. Most people want to start with what's cool and what's sexy and what's new. And I'm like, the knives have been our number one for 20 years. So it's not about cool and sexy. It's about depth of relationship and how you use that. But the what is not nearly as important as the who. Who are you going to send it to? Who's important? Who's currently your most valuable relationships and referral partners and centers of influence and employees? And if you want to grow, who are the people that you need to start making deposits in? And as Harvey McKay would say, dig your well before you're thirsty. Who are the 100 or 1,000 or 50 that you need to be making deposits in over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years in order to grow the company to where you want to grow to? So to me, like having a roadmap and a blueprint and identifying who and when and why. Normally when somebody hires our done-for-you agency to do the gifting for them, we walk them through this whole kind of like methodology and system and thought process. If your Non-Obvious crew wants to go download our entire like 20-year playbook, they can download it for free at giftologysystem.com, and they can take it to their team and say, hey, who are the people? How much should we be investing? What's the frequency or the timing that would actually be a surprise and delight? How much should we invest in that? Or or who are the other people, all of our process is right there, and they can get it and start to think and write down and identify those relationships and save your money now, put it aside in a bank account and say, hey, in 2021, I'm going to make an investment in my relationships. I'm going to have a relationship plan. I'm going to understand that it's not about tchotchkes and swag and my logo and all that kind of stuff. It's not about hitting the masses. It's about taking the list of 10,000 and paring it down to the 100 that matter. And then pouring 80% of your biz dev and marketing and relationship building budget into those people so that you're going really, really deep with the people that matter versus just doing things that feel good from a marketing perspective, but don't necessarily move the needle because they're not moving somebody's heart.
That's great advice. Definitely anyone who's listening right now, go to, you said giftologysystem.com, I think was the URL.
Yeah.
So you can treat this like a system. I know from having read John's book and looked at the resources that he's had in the past and just heard him speak that this is something that we're all capable of doing. And we just have to challenge ourselves to think more strategically about gift giving. Especially now is the good time to come up with the strategy. Maybe not give the gifts, right? But to at least come up with a strategy to be able to do that. So John, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. John Ruhlin, CEO of Giftology Group, sharing advice on how to give more memorable gifts. Thank you, everyone, for joining me this week. I do have a special shout out to my parents at the end of the show because this week is their 50th wedding anniversary. So thanks to this show, we are going to be thinking about what we should be doing as a gift for them beyond the things that we've already done, and just happy anniversary to both of you. Next week, we have a very exciting show coming up where we will be talking about the winners of the Non-Obvious Book Awards, the short list. Last week, we announced the long list, and it was 65 books that had been published in 2020 that were the absolute best nonfiction books in our team's opinion. And I'll be announcing the short list of the 15 top books from that list, as well as 5 winners. So please join me next week for that big announcement show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of our Non-Obvious Nation and for joining us for the Non-Obvious Insights show. And remember, always stay non-obvious.